Hi everyone, I'm Marcus Voss from AXO, and today I'm going to tell you what possible internal team roles are and which of them should be assigned when and to whom. We remember, in the last video on team development, we talked about self-organization. We noted that extensive self-organization of our project team within the framework of appropriate alignment in the form of goals and guardrails supports effective project work while maintaining a high level of satisfaction among team members. In the video on the agility profile, we had already put it in a nutshell. As much self-organization as possible, that is as little hierarchy and fixed role play as possible, but also as much as necessary. And it is precisely this, as much as necessary, that we are now dealing with. Let's start with Scrum, which we already know. The picture shows the Scrum process, and in the middle of the iteration loop, the three different colored figures stand for the three different roles defined with Scrum. Specifically, it looks like this. On the one hand, there is the user or customer, from whom the requirements for the solution to be created come. A rough distinction can also be made between two roles there. On the one hand, the experts who know how things work or should work and who are therefore important contacts. And on the other hand, the decision makers who are allowed to make binding decisions and prioritize with regard to the project and the use of time and budget. On the other hand, we now have the team working according to Scrum. The first role, defined with Scrum, is the only one that exists in the core of the team. In the past, it was called team member. In the current Scrum Guide, these team members are called developers, and developers can, in principle, first of all, take over cross-functionally all tasks related to development, no matter which task area they belong to, requirements and analysis, architecture and design, implementation or coding, testing, and so on. Scrum thus implicitly assumes, as we have already discussed in the video on the selection of the PM method, a functioning, far-reaching self-organization and autonomy of the team. In other words, who then takes on which specific task and who is responsible for what is determined by the existing skills and experience, but also by interests and preferences through coordination within the team. Scrum only defines the product owner PO as a further role. He is responsible for prioritizing the features to be implemented by the developers and thus for what is actually done with the available time and budget with regard to the scope of the solution. It therefore makes sense for this role to be assumed either directly by one of the decision makers on the side of the user or customer, or by a specially selected team member who then performs this role on behalf of the decision makers, so to speak. Secondly, Scrum defines the role of the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is responsible for two things. Firstly, for ensuring that Scrum is actually implemented in the project. This includes explaining Scrum to the team in theory and practice and advising and supporting the team in its implementation. Secondly, he is responsible for the effectiveness of the team through the application of Scrum and also in the sense that he should enable the team to continuously improve. In this sense, the Scrum Master is more like a trainer or coach of the team. But he is not the team captain. He is a leader insofar as he shows the team how things can or should be done. In this sense, the Scrum Master is at the service of the team. That is, as the saying goes, he is a servant leader. However, he does not take on all the tasks himself that would be classically described as leadership tasks, and that means in particular that he does not tell the team members what they should specifically do or who gets which tasks and how these are to be carried out. In the sense of Tuckman's authority matrix, the team is not manager-led by the Scrum Master, but self-led or even self-designed. And as a goal, there is only the prioritization by the PO. So far, so good. Sounds like it should be as self-organized as possible, but at the same time, with only as much responsibility on the part of management and executives as necessary. So why can it still make sense now to think about more organization and also about additional roles? The main reason is that it is not only about effectiveness, but also about efficiency. For this purpose, we will move the roles of Scrum Master and Product Owner into the background for the time being and look only at the team and possible roles in this team or at team internal roles. But before we do that, what exactly are roles and how can they be defined? A role description combines tasks and responsibilities. A well-known tool for clearly defining tasks and responsibilities is the so-called RACI matrix. R stands for responsible, as explained in the video on team development. A for accountable. C means that there has to be consultation, and I means that there has to be information given. A RACI matrix can now be defined directly for persons on the one hand, shown here as 1 to 4. This example matrix now states, for example, that person 1 is both accountable and responsible for task 1, that is, he or she has not delegated. Person 2 is to be consulted, and 3 and 4 are only to be informed. For task 2, for example, 1 also has the accountability, but the execution is delegated to 2, 3, and 4. That is, they are responsible and therefore do not have to be consulted or informed separately, etc. The definition of roles is done in the same way, except that the persons are first abstracted from the definition. Instead, the role is used to define a profile that can then be assigned to one or more people, either permanently or temporarily, with regard to the project. This is shown here using the example of the 3 roles defined in Scrum, Developer, PO, and Scrum Master for 4 exemplary tasks. For example, when it comes to the task of prioritizing features that the solution should have, then, as explained earlier, the PO role is both accountable and responsible for that. The developers should be consulted for a good prioritization, though, as they can certainly contribute information, if not on the benefits, then at least on the costs, and the Scrum Master may only be informed. Its accountability is, as I said, compliance with Scrum, whereby the actual implementation is delegated to the team or lies there. In this area, the PO may only need to be informed, and in Scrum, many other tasks are the responsibility of the team or the developers, both in terms of accountability and responsibility. Examples here are the estimation of the effort for the individual features or the associated user stories or the design of the architecture. Depending on the task, the PO and Scrum Master are only to be consulted or informed here, and that is exactly the point. By definition, the entire responsibility for most tasks lies with the team. Alignment is given to the extent that the PO sets goals by means of prioritization, and effectiveness is ensured as far as the Scrum Master supports this through his coaching. But is that enough? Is alignment and effectiveness enough for an optimal project outcome? As always, the answer is, it depends. There are at least 2 potential team roles that should be critically considered for optimal effectiveness and especially efficiency, because experience shows that they are or would be useful most of the time. We also call these primary team roles. On the one hand, there is the role of an architecture owner, architecture lead, or as it was often called in the past, chief architect. An architecture owner, or short AO, is a person in the team who has proven experience with architecture tasks and can act and decide confidently on the basis of this experience. This is all the more important the more demanding, the larger, the more complex, or the more recent the task or project and the solution to be created is. This is therefore a matter of safety, but also simply of efficiency, because it hopefully avoids unnecessary research work or trial and error. An AO is primarily a bridge builder between the technical aspects. What does the user or customer want or need? And the technology, how can this be implemented? Or can it be implemented at all? Keyword buildability. And an AO is by no means detached from the team, but always develops to a certain extent as well. So it's also about being a role model for the younger or perhaps less experienced team members. This makes an AO a primus inter pares, a first among equals. Up to this point, there is no conflict with the Scrum Guide, for example. It actually does not prohibit any further team roles, but it explicitly demands the absence of sub-team formation and hierarchies within the team. And this is where it gets exciting, because an AO in the sense of a lead architect or chief architect is also a lead or chief. In other words, an AO in the definition I use here is also accountable, namely for the solution that is created, and must therefore also be able to make at least ultimate decisions. This does not mean that he or she has to be responsible for all architectural tasks. An AO can and should, of course, delegate, and this can be very far-reaching, as explained in the video on team development with the levels of delegation. That exactly is to be considered. Does it make sense in my team to occupy this role explicitly, and thus, among other things, also deviate from the letter of the law of the Scrum Guide? Possibly this is also a question of how dogmatic I want to be, or how pragmatic. The second primary role is perhaps even more controversial in the Agile world. This is that of the project manager, project leads, or team leads. Project manager, in the following abbreviated PM, is of course first of all a person in the team who has proven experience, this time in the area of the very diverse tasks of project management. This includes tasks such as planning, project monitoring and controlling, control of the scope, risks and stakeholders, but also general communication and leadership in the project. What is important here is that this is the role that has the deadline and budget glasses on, that is, that pays particular attention to these 2 aspects. From a commercial point of view, this also includes the profitability of the project. In the videos on project management, we go into all these areas and the best practices in detail. So the task of project management in this sense is to lead the project to success or safely to the goal. And the question that arises is, do I need a person who is accountable for this and can therefore also make ultimate decisions? The PM role provides for exactly that, and experience from many projects shows that assigning this role to an appropriate person often makes sense. In any case, however, it is important that both roles, AO and PM, should be lived or filled cooperatively, and this is a requirement for the respective person. Is he or she able to do this in addition to his or her professional experience and skills? If you think about these two roles, the question naturally arises, what about the roles PO and Scrum Master, which have temporarily moved into the background? For the PO, the answer is simple. This role is definitely needed, and it doesn't raise any questions when interacting with the two primary team roles. In the case of the Scrum Master, however, the question then arises as to how this fits in with the PM role. In the sense of primus inter pares or servant leader, a good Scrum Master naturally already assumes many tasks that a good PM also assumes, coaching the team, supporting the processes, communication, etc. However, the role of the PM, as I've just described, goes beyond this in two respects. On the one hand, a PM is explicitly accountable for the many tasks listed above, which may not be seen by everyone but are nevertheless important and thus for efficiency as well as effectiveness. Therefore, the PM must at least ensure that everything is thought of and that the tasks are appropriately delegated or distributed within the team where it makes sense to do so. Secondly, unlike a Scrum Master, a PM also bears ultimate responsibility for the success of the project. In any case, it makes no sense to fill both roles without further consideration. As I said, the key here is to weigh things up carefully. And when we talk about primary team roles, there are obviously secondary ones as well. These are roles that make sense more or less often, depending on the project context, and also tend to have the character of ideas or suggestions for a good distribution of tasks in a largely autonomous team. And in particular, unlike AO and PM, the topic of accountability is not in the foreground for these roles. On the one hand, there is the role of the business analyst, or BA for short. This is very often useful simply because someone with experience and knowledge of methods in this area is needed in the team. A BA works professionally with both the PO and the experts on the side of the user or customer, and knows, for example, how to describe business processes or specify features or user stories well. Then in the area of quality assurance, roles such as, on the one hand, somewhat overarching quality manager with responsibility for planning and implementing analytical and constructive QA measures, or somewhat specific test manager with responsibility for planning and implementing meaningful tests at various levels. So, again, it's particularly about the aspect of experience in a specific area of responsibility. Or in addition to developers, gang explicitly testers or testers with special experience in the field of testing itself. And in general, the idea of defining roles with responsibility for a particular topic, a particular task, or for a particular component in the overall concept, etc., where responsibility here definitely means responsibility and, with a little more thought, perhaps accountability. But what you can also see, and this is also what the picture is supposed to express, too much specialization, and with it an individually too narrow view, is not helpful either. And, to put it deliberately bluntly, who is still developing software here at all? So, what do we want to capture? What are the best practices with regard to roles, that is, defined tasks and responsibilities in an agile project that is also as effective and efficient as possible? The team will definitely have to think about roles, who has certain skills and experience, who takes over just therefore meaningfully also the appropriate tasks, topic efficiency. And to what extent is this then also associated with accountability? Working with the racy categories helps with the definition, and that is perhaps a little provocative now. But if I want to be not only effective but also efficient, I have to prioritize expert knowledge and experience over the interest and willingness to learn of the individuals in the team. In the long term, however, and beyond the context of an individual project, this is of course also a trade-off. After all, the experts of the future will also have to gain experience at some point, so it can make sense to give the team some role play, especially for the primary team roles of AO and PM. In any case, however, you have to be sparing when defining roles. The rule remains, As little hierarchy and fixed role play as possible, but also as much as necessary. And if I assign leadership roles such as AO or PM, then only to people who lead cooperatively in these roles and are not micromanagers. Otherwise, I'm taking the principle of agile development completely ad absurdum. So much for team roles. And that was the last video on the process strategy. We'll see you again in more videos about the many other exciting areas in software engineering. Until then,